Hello everyone. This alert I want to point your attention to a prophecy that is very much overlooked, but it's very actual, as you will see. Also I want to remind you of the recent trumpet alerts. These things, in particular about Damascus and Jerusalem, are still going on and even intensifying. And so we are very much in the season where all these things are coming to pass. And the last alert was, of course, about Jerusalem, after the declaration by the United States that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and also the tensions surrounding that are still going on. And I pointed that last alert to Zechariah chapter 12, the first few verses where this is actually prophesied. And as well also I pointed your attention to Psalm 83 in relation to that. Now Zechariah chapter 12 is towards the end of the book of Zechariah. Zechariah is very much in line with the book of Revelation. I often call it the book of Revelation of the Old Testament, and it follows a timeline. Now the last chapter is chapter 14, and so chapter 12 obviously is very much towards the end. And if you continue to read chapter 12, so after the fact that Jerusalem becomes a stumbling block unto all nations, and a cup of drunkenness to the surrounding nations. After that you see that it goes into what we usually call the tribulation period, this last period of 7 years before the return of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then in chapter 14 we see the return of Jesus. So that parallels chapter 19 of book of Revelation, and book of Revelation then in chapter 20 describes the reign of Jesus on earth for 1,000 years. Now, in Zechariah 14, it says in verse 7, so this is about the return of Jesus, but it shall be done, it shall be one day which shall be known to the Lord, not day nor night, but it shall come to pass that at evening time it shall be light. So this day is awaiting, it's known to the Lord. It shall come to pass. Then in verse 8 it says, and it shall be in that day that living waters go out from Jerusalem, half of them toward the former sea, and half of them toward the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. So again, in alignment with Revelation, it says that water will flow from Jerusalem. It's even called living waters. And we know also that there will be a great earthquake which will level most of the land, except Jerusalem will still be on a height. And so from there water will flow, and it will flow to the east and to the west, two directions. And that is where I want to get at, because it says here, half of them toward the former sea and half of them toward the hinder sea. So it speaks about two seas towards which this water will flow. And if you look at the map and the position of Jerusalem, you will see that both at the east and at the west of Jerusalem there is a sea. In the west it's the Mediterranean Sea, which is a bit further away, and more nearby on the east side is the Dead Sea. Now, these terms, of course, they did not exist in biblical times, not in the time of Zechariah. And so he uses another term, but he says the hinder sea, so that's the sea that is furthest away, which would be the Mediterranean. And the other he calls the former sea, which implies that at the moment that this happens, it is not a sea anymore. It's a former sea. In other words, it's been dried up. So that is a very interesting thing, because in the days that Zechariah wrote, which is hundreds of years before Christ, until today there is water in this sea. But At the same time, we see in the recent years that the water level in the Dead Sea is dropping dramatically. And this was again in the news, and as you can see in the images behind me, and I will also put a link to the report from which these images are taken. This is a big problem. Hotels and resorts along the Dead Sea have been closed, and most of the area around the sea is no-go zone because it's too dangerous, because the earth is collapsing because of the drying of the soil and the salt packets that are below, and it's collapsing and causing sinkholes. So we see that it's drying very fast, and I believe it will even increase in speed, this drying. So that is very interesting, because this is again one of these things that we can simply verify ourselves in the world around us, and we see how true the Bible is. Now again, this prophecy in Zechariah 14 is when Jesus returns. That is, there is at least, or there is 7 years prior to that, which is the tribulation period, and until that starts, we still have some time, although I don't believe it's much. So it's at least, let's say, 7 years from now that it will be completely dry and indeed can be called a former sea. But that we see it happening now already shows again how near to that day we are. And I've said the same about the trumpet alert called Strange Bedfellows, where I talk about the alignment between Iran, Turkey and Russia. Also something that is a foreshadow of what is going to happen during the 7-year tribulation. So again, I would say, as always, keep looking up, because our redemption draws near.